Hi, Megan. Welcome back to Salinas Now.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Well, we're glad to have you again. So we're going to talk about something that is on everybody's mind. It seems like the top three priorities are housing, housing, and housing. Salinas has, we all understand, like many cities in California, an acute, severe housing crisis. I don't know how the city compares to other cities in California. Are we about the same, or we have even more challenges?
Yeah, I think we have more challenges. One of the challenges is that our housing is very high and our median incomes are not high, are low. And so actually, in terms of the state, we rank third least affordable after the LA area and the Santa Barbara, Santa Maria area.
Wow.
Yeah.
We're the third
Yes.
most expensive?
Yes. When you factor in incomes and actual costs.
Yeah, I can see how the demographics and the housing prices are really going to be in tension and cause a lot of stress and dislocations.
Yes.
For that.
Yeah, definitely. And we have a issue too where we have a lot of overcrowding. Many parts of our community, we have a lot of people living there, for example, in East Salinas, but we have kind of traditional single-family housing stock, and so we have a lot of people doubled, tripled up, and that's also reflected in some of the school statistics, which the county has identified about 9,000 children that meet the McKinley-Vento definition of homeless, which means most of them, the majority, aren't necessarily street homeless, but they're doubled, tripled up, living in maybe garages and not safe or stable housing conditions.
Right. So we have demographics are on the poor side. Housing costs are number three. We have crowded areas. What's going on in terms of addressing our acute housing problems? What it may refer to it as a crisis, in fact.
Yeah. So in our department and working with other departments, we've taken it very seriously and looked at what can we do as a city, kind of creative, out-of-the-box solutions. And so we've been looking at things such as what are our land use regulations, and can we change those to make things more favorable? An example is recently we adopted an adaptive reuse ordinance, which makes it much easier to adapt older commercial buildings into housing. We're starting to look at development impact fees. We recently changed the timing of when you have to pay those fees for residential to the point of certificate of occupancy, which helps fund housing. It delays the upfront costs and pushes it back to when the developer actually is able to lease up. So that's a big help. We've also looked at, ways of how to find land and how to promote opportunity sites that we have, and more recently talking to folks about opportunity zones as maybe a way of helping to finance housing. And of course we have used our little federal funds that we have to the maximum ability through the community development block grant funds and our home funds, and also using deferral of impact fees to help affordable housing being constructed. And so we're just finishing off the Hikari project, which the Monterey County Housing Development Corporation helped, or is the lead in developing that, and the city put money towards that. And then also in Chinatown, the city put $4.5 million towards Moongate Plaza, which is a mid-pen development, and that's 90 units of permanent supportive housing. So we're always looking to how we can use our little money and leverage things like tax credits and other things to really build the affordable housing.
Right. So those two projects, total number of units, and when will they both come online and be available for occupancy?
Yeah, so The Hikari complex is part of what we know as the Haciendas complex, which there were 4 phases of that development. And it is occupied. There's 191 units, and 50 units in Hikari are family housing. Just prior to that, they completed the Daiichi Village project, which is 41 units of senior housing in the same area, and this is in Chinatown. So right there in Chinatown, through our partnership, there are 191 units of affordable housing. And then the Moongate Plaza is 88 units of permanent supportive housing for really singles and homeless and people struggling with mental health and health issues, and 2 units for property managers.
Right. Just struck me. So all of these are called, at least the housing, there's 4 phases of the Hacienda projects, but they all have Asian related names, and then there's even Moongate is a sort of reference to some Chinese history.
Yeah, I think it was really important because this is in Chinatown to really reflect the communities, the immigrant communities that have made up Chinatown, which of course, initially was Japanese and Chinese, later Filipino, there's a presence there, and then a lot of Latinos came also. So you kind of have the name Haciendas plus the name of the Daiichi and Hikari now represent kind of that really rich immigrant history of Chinatown. And again, Moongate also reflects that partnership, and ACE, Asian Cultural Experience, has been really involved, particularly I think with the Mid-Penn project, and integrating the culture into the actual design, and I think they kind of collaboratively worked on the name for that project.
Well, some of the 2 anchors are the Confucius Church, the Chinese Church, and the Buddhist Temple. They've been around for a long, long time.
Yep.
And looks like they'll be around for a long, long time longer.
And then, on the edge is also the Filipino Hall and Kaya Cebu, which is, named after its city.
Let's focus on Chinatown. How is that additional affordable housing changing sort of the mix in Chinatown? It was not too long ago pretty empty. Businesses leaving, more encampments from the homeless, continued drug dealing. So it was, many ways, many things have not changed in Chinatown until some of the buildings started. So how do you see that whole, built environment coming up out of the ground, people occupying housing? How's that changing the culture and the landscape of Chinatown?
Yeah, so I think we have, it's just starting, so there still is a lot of those challenges there. But what we have now, the opportunity is actually to really work hand in hand with Mid-Penn Housing and some of the service providers to ensure that people that are living in the encampments in Chinatown are moving into the actual Moongate Plaza development. So the city is bringing on board a person shortly, a contractor who specializes as a social worker and has a lot of credentials working in street outreach to help us really work with the service providers to get people from the streets directly into Moongate Plaza. So our goal is to, if we can get 50 people who are currently on the streets in Chinatown into that location, that will really help kind of start to see the encampments dwindle. We are also really working hand in hand with businesses to see how we can provide some business support. There's an opportunity in Moongate Plaza on the ground floor for commercial and other kind of service providers. And we've had a really great partnership with the police, thanks to Chief Frese's leadership, they have a homeless outreach officer who is doing a lot in Chinatown and working directly with the homeless kind of to change the culture. And then beginning in July, we hope to bring on Downtown Streets team, which could actually start employing some of the homeless to actually start cleaning and addressing some of the trash issues in Chinatown. And so I think, you know, the combination of these developments with these social services intervention, the cooperation of the PD, and really looking at kind of some of the issues related to the trash more comprehensively than just cleanups, is going to help shift Chinatown. And another important thing is we're working on the revitalization plan of Chinatown.
Right.
And so we hope to be presenting that to City Council in August or early September. And we're really excited. We've had a lot of research that's been done looking at some of the properties and, you know, trying to get them ready for redevelopment too. We'd like to start promoting some of those properties, and we're looking at some of the environmental issues in Chinatown to help kind of prepare for redevelopment.
It kind of sends, at least to the development community, business community, that the city's is serious. We're having an update plan. Here's some opportunities for you. We have public safety that's, you know, now part of the team and actively working, you know, the criminal element there to get rid of that. Public Works is continuing to clean up. So it looks like there's a lot of a team approach, if you will, to resolving the issues in Chinatown.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't say enough as how everyone has really come together and really taken on this challenge and have done their part. Like you said, you know, Public Works, you know, the police department, and even we've had some discussions with the fire department as well about how we might be able to offer some, you know, better coordination with paramedic type services. So, and of course we work hand in hand with the fire department and code enforcement on addressing some of the challenges in terms of that in the area.
So let's go back to the whole housing issue before we delve into more of the homeless. Downtown, they had a vibrancy plan that was adopted, and there were some changes in ordinances that allow maybe helping the development of housing in downtown. Can you tell us what those are and how development is sort of paying attention to that now? Are we getting, you know, more interest? Are we having some development downtown for housing?
Yeah, I think there is becoming more interest. We recently adopted an adaptive reuse ordinance, which basically allows the conversion of existing office or commercial buildings without having to meet new requirements in terms of parking, open space, density, or height. And so the Rabobank is a great example of that. That building is being converted. The upper story will be residential units, and I think they'll have about 50 residential units right in the core of the downtown. We have a couple other smaller adaptive reuse projects going on, one on Monterey Street and two actually on Monterey Street, one just completed, which was 16 units. And we have had some interest from folks looking at possibly converting other buildings, including the California building. So we're trying to see how we might be able to promote that more widely. I think the other thing that has been piqued a lot of interest is the changing in the timing of the collection for the development impact fees.
Okay.
And so that's something we're also promoting. And we're looking at other ways. We're starting to look at some of the downtown parking lots and how those could be converted and marketed for downtown development. And eventually I think there's an interest in looking at the ITC and what we might be able to do there.
Right, the Intermodal Transportation Center.
Yeah.
Right. So through your leadership, there was there are changes in accessory dwelling units, right, in terms of the speed and ease, if you will, development of those kinds of units, because that's maybe sort of the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah,
Can you
so
tell us where we are on that?
yeah, so we hired through the VISTA program. We got a VISTA program. We have a housing VISTA who's really been focusing on some kind of policy work that we can do. And she's really been focusing on accessory dwelling units, as you suggested, as kind of a low-hanging fruit. And she started to do research on it, and she saw that we didn't have a lot of ADUs. Last year we had 8 permits. And started contacting individuals and finding out what the impediments were for developing ADUs. And the first thing they said were the impact fees, that was pretty much, when they found out about them, they would oftentimes just walk away from the project. So we're working on exempting ADUs from city development impact fees. The other step we're taking is to really look at educational materials. How can we improve those? We are also going to be looking at hiring a consultant to help us with a couple of different simple proposals so that they could have pre-approved plans and know, like, if they built it according to these specs, that they would meet the building standards and the requirements. So we're looking at some of those things. We did change our accessory dwelling unit ordinance to comply with the state changes, and it'll be interesting to see, because the state is looking at different modifications. So we're going to try to keep and make sure that we're consistent and maybe even a leader in some kind of innovative ways to help facilitate ADUs. The other thing we're looking at is financing, to see if we can figure out a way to help finance ADUs.
Now, one of the other developments is a brand new development. It would be in the future growth area. So it looks like, based on what you've been able to let people know, the West End plan or area plan is now ready for public consumption. And hopefully after that's done, building could happen soon. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. We just released the draft environmental impact report for the West Area Specific Plan. Our goal is to get the entitlements through by June. There will be a little bit of time because the developers will have to create subdivision maps.
A lot of detail.
Yeah, a lot of detail. But yeah, I think within probably 18 months, in a year and a half to 2 years, we could see dirt, moving. So that's really exciting.
Right. And they were looking full build out, something close to 4,000 units?
Yes,
right?
4,000 units.
Yeah.
And it'll take, place over time, probably it's a 20 to 30 year plan.
Right.
But it will definitely help.
The Salinas plan calls out the blueprint for fiscal sustainability, calls out for a number of changes in housing because of the impact of the acute housing on the service level and causing more calls for service, more demands for service because of the housing shortage. So what are some of the things in response to that plan are you looking at in terms of planning or implementing in the future here?
Yeah, so we did receive a grant to really evaluate a rental registration and inspection program. Housing conditions are a challenge in the city, so that's something that is underway. We also want to start looking at the regulations related to, we have a lot of unregulated, I guess you could call them boarding houses, where people are renting rooms and houses, and looking at a way to maybe legalize that, that will not put so much, put people in unsafe conditions, but allow for some of those densities and that use of housing, because if we don't allow some of it, we will feel the pressures everywhere.
Right.
And then we've also been looking a little bit more recently about the agricultural workforce, both permanent and temporary. And I know, although we're not master leasing hotel motels. We're looking at a way that would allow some employers to do that as a kind of a short-term solution for some of the issues we're facing.
Because you just completed, was it last year, the farm workers
Yeah.
study, which hadn't been done since 2002 or 3.
Yeah.
So it had a number of recommendations there.
Yeah, absolutely. Then a lot of these things come together. I mean, that farm worker housing study, and I want to stress action plan.
Yes.
We're really
Right.
focused on action.
Right.
Talks about ADUs as a potential source of housing and recommended kind of looking at the development impact fee. So again, that's
Right.
one way we're trying to move that forward. We have an oversight committee. It is a regional plan and it includes both the Salinas and Pajaro Valley. And so we meet and we work together on different kind of actions outlined in that plan. And so another thing, we're partnering with the county to identify land on the outskirts of the city that could be used for some of the migrant or seasonal farm worker housing, so that people know, like if you look for housing in these areas, the city is amenable to connecting with our infrastructure and the county is amenable for you to build there. Because in the past, I think some of our growers look to build housing, but in areas that the county didn't necessarily support because of lack of infrastructure. So this is a way of really helping. So that's one way of how we're trying to address some of the housing needs, and the farm worker housing study called for that.
Right. So we talked a little bit, mentioned in Chinatown, the homelessness issues, and the city's been very aggressive, I believe, in terms of trying to figure out solutions, although the city is not the official public agency in the county. The county is for homelessness, and there are a number of social service agencies and private not-for-profit agencies that serve the homeless. So where are we with making progress? There's a agreement to build a permanent shelter and an agreement to build permanent supportive housing.
Right.
So that sounds like a very large set of issues to tackle. Two different kinds of development and on county land, right?
Right. We have, I think, made some really good inroads in coordinating more effectively with the county, and I think a good example of that is we have a memorandum of understanding with the county to work together on the construction of the homeless shelter on county land, and also on county land the development of permanent supportive housing. And so we've been partnering with them. They would be an applicant for state funding. It's called the Homeless Emergency Aid Program, or some people know it as HEAP. The county would apply for funding for the homeless shelter, and so we've been working with them, and our intention is to also work with the community on how the operations are to minimize any impacts to the community. And then we've offered to help lead in a request for proposal process for the permanent supportive housing at 1220 Natividad. And so we see that as a really great opportunity. We want to have some community discussions on things that are important for the community to put into the RFP regarding that housing. And so we're going to be working on that in the spring and the summer so that we can have something out shortly.
Are you pretty optimistic about both these projects?
Yeah, I mean, I know it's been a little bit controversial about the homeless shelter, but I cannot stress how important it is that we have a permanent 24-hour emergency homeless shelter. We have a warming shelter, which is different. It's not 24 hours. And it has been moving around because we don't have a secure location. And the facility that we're currently in is too small. It doesn't have things like showers. And we have so many families. That's what people don't appreciate.
Right.
That are in the shelter, and that is growing. That's a national trend. Homelessness among families is
Right.
growing is a national trend, and we need that emergency housing because that's how they get prioritized for subsidized permanent housing. We need it as a bridge to really address the housing crisis. So the homeless shelter is a critical component of that. And that's why we also are having the permanent supportive housing, because we recognize that the shelter is a bridge to kind of permanent housing for homeless folks. And so that's kind of the vision, and that's how they work together. They're not a standalone, but it's
Right.
really pieces of the puzzle of the comprehensive housing strategy for homelessness in the city and in the region.
People have a stereotype of who a homeless person is, right? Like the person with just their shopping cart full of stuff and a gruffy old gentleman pushing the cart around. And that's their idea of the person that's homeless. That what we're seeing, what you're seeing on the ground is a totally different picture, which is children. You mentioned 9,000 under the McKinney definition. And then it sounds like in the warming shelter and what your projections are looking like, it's more families that'll be in these shelters. Less of the single male, but more of the families.
Yeah, I mean, like if we look at the current warming shelter, 2/3 are either children or women. So
amazing.
Only 1/3 are men. It's possible, we hope that changes and that we can continue to work with the chronically homeless, but we
Right.
have to stop kind of the new flow
Right.
from coming in. And what we're seeing, interestingly enough, our homeless numbers have gone up a lot, but if you look at the data, the chronically homeless population, which are kind of the stereotype of what you're describing, has almost stayed exactly the same from 2015 through 2017. So in 2 years, that number has gone up by 1. So it tells you that it is this kind of newer population that is coming in. And so we really have to kind of both address both, right? Address the new folks from coming in, helping them stabilize housing, rapid
Right.
rehousing, and other tools, and then work with the chronically homeless who need more services, mental health services, and they, that's a population that works really well in kind of permanent supportive housing where you have wraparound services for their mental health issues, their health issues. And so we're kind of taking a two-prong approach,
Right.
and the shelter is what we're really seeing most effective, is really getting people in there and then out within a 90-day period, and
Right.
really transitioning people who can get ready for housing into housing.
Right. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show again. I'm sure we'll have you back on housing or permitting or something else that your department that has many ways of interacting with the public and how our quality of life improves in the city.
Yeah, I look forward to it because I think that we have an amazing staff doing great work. So
Yeah.
I'd like to share that.
Yeah,
So,
they do great work, and so do you.
oh, thank you.
Thanks again.
Thanks.